You've got to hand it to Donald Trump. He has really developed a very effective scam. Whenever Trump's government does something that's completely indefensible, the administration will identify the lowest ranking person available and pretend that that's as far as the problem goes. Oh, ICE tried to hire a 600-pound disabled guy who's not cleared to do anything by his doctor. That's some issue with a hiring manager. A bureaucrat canceled the wrong grants, and as a result, people died. Well, that's just that bureaucrat's fault. Forget that it was all enabled by Trump and Elon Musk's Doge. There was a prosecution or an indictment that fell apart in humiliating fashion. That was a lone wolf prosecutor who did the wrong thing, or somebody redacted the wrong part of an Epstein file or something like that. But we who are doing a broader analysis, we recognize when you see the same sorts of abuses everywhere in this federal government, you can't really believe that these are isolated mistakes. They're really a governing philosophy that goes all the way to the very top. Now, let me give you some examples. Start with ICE. After an ICE officer fatally shot this Colombian man in Maine, the officer's relatives said, this guy has a serious history of mental health problems. He has a history of violent behavior. He shouldn't have been working with guns, near guns. He shouldn't be anywhere near guns. And Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, comes out and goes, oh, you know what? He never should have passed ICE's vetting process. It's a technical problem. It's like when HR forgets to give you the sociopath test or the Myers-Briggs or whatever. But then you dig deeper and you go, well, how did this guy pass? What factors influenced that this officer passed the hiring? Well, you've got to go back to the top. Donald Trump and Stephen Miller said, we are going to do historically aggressive deportations and raids. We're going to do 3,000 arrests a day of violent illegals. There aren't that many. It just doesn't make any sense. That puts ICE under this huge pressure to do 3,000 arrests. We need way more officers. We need to accelerate operations. We've got to do this. And that is what put the system in place that led to this guy being hired and the 600-pound guy almost being hired. Trump didn't personally hire the officer that did the shooting. Trump didn't order the shooting, obviously. But the officer was hired, deputized, and given a gun in a system created by the president, who chooses leadership, sets the incentives, and says, what behavior are we going to reward? And when you say, we need more officers, they need to be brutal, we're going to do mass arrests right away, forget about oversight, these are warriors and they should be given leeway to do basically whatever they want, of course you're going to end up with these reckless, violent outcomes. It's predictable. Example number two, the administration's decision to cancel $7.5 billion in clean energy grants. The administration admitted in court that they selected the projects to cancel because they were in states that voted for Kamala Harris. So that's not a grant officer checked the wrong box. It was an oversight. It was political retaliation. Let's look at blue states and just start canceling stuff. And Americans who voted against Trump were punished by the federal government. Now, remember that Donald Trump has spent years saying Democratic cities and states, they should suffer because they opposed me. There's going to be punishment for them. So they figured that out. Start canceling grants in blue states. I'll give you one more example, which is the Justice Department. We have new records that were newly released records. And they show Todd Blanche, Trump's acting AG, wannabe AG, Todd Blanche organizing these recurring meetings of the so-called weaponization working group, assigning senior officials to these really politically charged cases just to see, are we doing what Trump wants us to do in terms of revenge? This is not an intern. This is not an unknown bureaucrat. He was Trump's personal criminal defense lawyer, elevated to run the Justice Department. Trump comes out from the top down and he goes, we need investigations. My political enemies are going to be investigated. And his former lawyer supervises the people that are assigned to those investigations. And we're supposed to believe that when one of these investigations ends up being intimidatory or bogus or merely to scare or mire someone in legal expenses, that it's just a coincidence. It has nothing to do with what's going on at the top. So these are three, I think, really salient examples. And then there's like this bigger one that's a little different, but I still think is related. Epstein files. Before it was obvious that Donald Trump was actually going to be in a position to release the Epstein files, he, as the campaigner and the people around him, said, if and when Trump wins, we're going to be releasing these Epstein files. And then over time, they backed off of that. Eventually, the Epstein Files Transparency Act was passed. And instead of just doing what it said, they exposed identifying information about victims, but they redacted identifying information about potential perpetrators. And Ghislaine Maxwell, in the middle of all of it, gets transferred to a lower security facility after meeting with Todd Blanche, one that would never normally house anyone convicted of the crimes she was convicted of. Now, we don't have evidence that Trump personally said, put Ghislaine Maxwell in a nicer place or what. We don't have that. But the person controlling the process is Trump's former attorney. And he is out there doing what he can to prevent Donald Trump from negative information coming out about him and his immediate allies. So Trump doesn't need to go, Todd, go punish my enemies, protect my friends, ignore the law, and bribe whoever you need to bribe to make sure nothing negative comes out about me. And the theme here is that authoritarian systems usually don't need to give the explicit instructions. Everybody understands that. The leader establishes priorities. The loyalists learn what gets you praise and what gets you promoted versus what gets you removed or attacked. And that's what you need. It's a structure of incentives. And by the way, in my book, Pay Attention, I talk a lot about incentives. And one of the things that we sometimes mix up in conversations that we have about a lot of different issues is we sometimes attribute personal agency when what we really have is a system of incentives. And so with social media, I'm making an analogy now, bear with me. In the book, I talk about how sometimes we have a tendency to see, for example, what Facebook recommends through the personal political beliefs of Mark Zuckerberg. Now, Mark Zuckerberg has political beliefs, and it's totally conceivable that he could go and say, hey, you know what? Promote right-wing content and damage left-wing content on Facebook. He could do that. But the real reason that across all digital platforms, certain content does well in the algorithm and certain content doesn't do well is actually the incentive structure that is in place. And I would apply that to the Trump administration. It's not that Trump has to go out and say, you better do this or you're going to get punished. Sometimes he does do that, but he sets the incentive structure, which is here's the sort of behavior that gets you an attaboy, and here's the sort of behavior that gets me to put out agit trash on Truth Social about you and either force you to resign or fire you. The incentives structure how people behave. These agencies are not suffering from the moral collapse that comes from the top, but they're adapting to who runs the government. And you follow each of these trails, Epstein and ICE, and it leads back to Trump and Stephen Miller and the loyalists. And that is maybe one of the most disturbing and depressing aspects of this. And if it turns out that Donald Trump at the end of the day torpedoes Republicans for 26 and 28, they really have Trump to blame at the end of the day. Here's something people don't think about enough. There is not much of a line between online privacy and real world safety. If someone gets angry at you in traffic, at work, in a relationship, or in a comment section, it can be very easy for them to figure out your details, address, phone number, relatives. A lot of that information is just sitting on public search databases right now. There is something you can do. Our sponsor Incogni helps protect you and your family by automatically sending removal requests to hundreds of these databases, and they are legally required to comply and get rid of your information. Incogni will follow up until it's done. Incogni's custom removals is my favorite feature. If I find information on a random directory or an obscure business database or some new people search site, I just paste the link into Incogni. Their privacy experts work to get it removed. Removing your information from these online databases is critical to protect yourself and your loved ones. Get 60% off when you go to incogni.com/Pakman. Use the code Pakman. The link is in the description.